Number 13. Number 13, it is f of x is equal to 8 over x minus 3. I want you to graph this function. So this function, as you can see, there is no hole. The VA will be x equal to 3. It's what makes the denominator 0. DHA is Bobo, bigger on the bottom, which makes y equal to 0. X-intercept, it's impossible because we cannot make the numerator equal to 0. The y-intercept, you make x equal to 0 and you find y equal negative 8 over 3. When you attempt to graph this function, you have a vertical asymptote at 3. You have a horizontal at 0. And you have a y-intercept at negative 8 over 3, which is about right over here. So that means by making an educated guess, I'm just going to go here. And on this side, I just have to choose the top because any number bigger than 3, if you plug it into the function, let's say you plug in 10. 8 is positive. 10 minus 3 is positive. Positive divided by positive is a positive. Here's a couple things I want you to know. When you do the vertical line test, you're testing to see if f of x is a function. And as you can see here, if you do a vertical line test, you'll see that f of x is a function. When you do a horizontal line test, you're testing to see if the inverse is also a function. And as you can see from this graph, the inverse is also a function. And so when they ask you to verify that the inverse is also a function, this is how you do. You do a horizontal line test. Now, how do we find the inverse? How do we find the inverse? This is the process. You take f of x is equal to 8 over x minus 3. You change f of x to y. You make it y equal 8 over x minus 3. You swap the x's and the y. X becomes a y and y becomes an x. And then you have to solve for y. To solve for y, I'm going to put this over 1. I'm going to put these in parentheses. I'm going to cross multiply x times the quantity y minus 3 equal to 8. We're solving for y. I'm going to divide both sides by x. And that gives me y minus 3 equal 8 over x. Add 3 to both sides. And that means y equal 8 over x minus 3. Now we want to be careful. This y is not the same as the y up there. This is your inverse function. And we call it f to the negative 1, which is 8 over x minus 3. What I want you to look at here very briefly, if you were to graph this, you're going to notice there's going to be no hole in that graph. You're going to notice the VA is x equal to 0, which was the horizontal asymptote for the function. The HA is going to be the negative 3 right here, which was the vertical asymptote for the other function. You're going to find the x-intercept here is when you make 8 over x minus 3 equal to 0. And then you add 3 to both sides and you solve for x, and then you have x is equal to negative 3 over 8. That was the y-intercept before. And the y-intercept here, you can say it's impossible because you can never divide by 0. So that means when you go on to graph this inverse right here, you will notice that the vertical asymptote happened to be at 0. And the horizontal at negative 3. And you have an x-intercept at negative 3/8. So this function, by making an educated guess, is going to go this way. And here, you're going to have to choose the bottom part. Otherwise, you're going to cross the x-axis, which is impossible. If you take those two functions and put them on each other, on top of each other, you can see the symmetry with respect to the line y equal to x. Continuing with number 14. Number 14, you have this function, f of x is equal to 12 over x plus 9. Okay, let's go ahead and graph it. This is going to be no hole in that graph. The VA is x equal to 0. Your HA is going to be y equal to positive 9. The x-intercept, you're going to make y equal to 0, which 12x plus 9 equal to 0. And if you solve for x, x is going to equal to negative 12 divided by 9, reduced by 3 will be negative 4/3. Next is the y-intercept. The y-intercept, x is 0. And if x is 0, it's going to be impossible because you will be dividing by 0. So go ahead and try to graph this function. To graph this function, we're going to start with the vertical asymptote at 0 and the horizontal is at 9. So if the horizontal is at 9 up here, this is 9, just go ahead and label. You're going to cross the x-axis at negative 1 and 1/3. Let's just pretend it's right here. So by making an educated guess, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. On this side, I'm going to choose the top because I can now cross the x-axis and choose the bottom. Perfect. Now, as you can see, it passes the vertical line test and the horizontal line test, which means we know that the inverse is also a function. Now, how do we find the inverse? To find the inverse, you're going to start with f of x is equal to 12 over x plus 9. We're going to make f of x a y. We're going to swap the x's and the y. So this becomes x equal 12 over y plus 9. We're going to solve for y. To solve for y, I need you to subtract 9. So that will be x minus 9 equal 12 divided by y. I want you to put parentheses here and make it over 1 and cross multiply. This will be y times the quantity x minus 9 equal to 12. Please don't FOIL and make it more confusing. So at this point right here, remember we're solving for y. So that means get rid of that factor, divide both sides by x minus 9. And this is what y is equal to, 12 over x minus 9. This y is the inverse function. X to the negative 1 is equal to 12 over x minus 9. You can graph this one and see the symmetry. You don't have to, but I would like you to practice and go ahead and graph this one. And notice that the VA are swapped with the HA, x-intercept are swapped with the y-intercept. Finding number 15, I want you to do number 15 this way. If you can do, this is you, this is your friend, and this is together, doing the same exact job. So, you can do the job in 5 hours. Your friend, we don't know the time if he has to do the job by himself, so I'm going to put it in X hours. Together, meaning if you work together, it's going to be done in 3 hours. So this is how we're going to set up the problem. You have 1 over 5 plus 1 over x, and x being the time if your friend worked by himself or herself. And this is the time for both of you working together. I want you to find a common denominator and solve for x. To find a common denominator, which is 15x, I'm going to multiply here by 3x on the top and on the bottom. Here I'm going to multiply 15 on the top and 15 on the bottom. The idea to make every single term have the same denominator. And here I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 5x. Okay, now look over the denominator. Is this denominator 15x? This denominator 15x? This denominator 15x? And we do have an equal sign. Cross them out. Copy the numerator and solve for x. 3x plus 15 is equal to 5x. Subtract 3x from both sides, and that will be 15x equal to 2x. And divide by 2x is equal 7.5. So your friend, if it does work by himself or herself, it's going to take them 7.5 hours by themselves. The end.